Hello? Hello? Testing? Can you hear me? Is everybody here? This is a podcast made by people with disabilities for people with disabilities. I'm your host, xAnge Keegan. Each episode, we are going to be bringing you content that matters to us, the disability community of Caboolture and the surrounding areas. We'll be talking to guests here and getting out into the community where we want you to tell us about what you want to hear about. Subscribe, like, and follow us on all the social media platforms and tell your mates. Welcome. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Is Everybody Here? We'll start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the Gubbi Gubbi lands on which this podcast is recorded. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and acknowledge the important role of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and that they continue to play within the community. I'm your host, xAnge Keegan, and today I have our very first guest, Cheryl. Now, Cheryl, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Cheryl. I'm 60 years old. I'm 165 centimetres standing and 103 centimetres sitting, which I do most of the time because I'm a wheelchair user. Mm-hmm. So I have lots of views about lots of things. I'm a keen student of history and I love to chat. So
absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Cheryl. You're awesome. Cheryl and I actually know each other from the Caboolture QDN peer support group. And whenever we get together, we have lots and lots to chat about, which we have been for the whole time of like the setup for this podcast. And it's been really cool. I will just also give you a visual description of myself. I am a 176 centimetre tall, standing, white, middle-aged woman. I'm 47. And I've got crew cut hair, very short hair, and it's brown. Anyway, that's me. And okay, so today I wanted to have Cheryl come on the show and have a chat to us about some of the very cool things that she's very passionate about. And Cheryl is a great advocate for disability. She advocates very well for herself, which is not always the easiest thing. I think everybody in the disability community will agree with that. And she's, as she said, a keen student of history. So we really just wanted to talk about accessibility through the ages, where it all comes from, just a general chat. So Cheryl, here in Moreton Bay, you're a fellow resident of Moreton Bay, obviously.
I am. I live in Burpengary.
Excellent. That's awesome. Now, how accessible in general terms do you find Burpengary, Moreton Bay, Caboolture?
Actually, I think Burpengary is particularly good. The council's just finished putting in lots of lovely wide flat footpaths. They've now put in pedestrian crossings at pretty much all of the traffic lights. It's not too bad. I used to live in Caboolture and it was a whole different story because for some reason Caboolture residents don't seem to need footpaths. As a wheelchair user, I really do need a footpath. I'm not confident trundling down the road in a wheelchair because I'm always worried I'm going to be run over by a Land Cruiser. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of very unusual and very steep curb crossings. I do appreciate the council putting in curb crossings, but I think for people in wheelchairs, they need to be a little bit of a gentler slope.
Absolutely.
And a few more of them.
100%. I find the same thing. I have a mobility device myself. I'm ambulant, but I have an A-linker, which is basically a trike, a walking bike for people listening along. And I find the same thing. If I actually wasn't ambulant and could get off my mobility device and step up on a curb, I would be stuck if I was a wheelchair user full time. Yep.
It's incredibly frustrating to get halfway down a street and then the footpath disappears, or to get to a corner and realise there actually isn't a curb, so you've got to backtrack all the way down the road to find a place where you can get off the curb. Unlike a skateboarder, I can't just jump the curb.
Absolutely.
Though I've been tempted to try once or twice.
Absolutely. So Cheryl and I were actually just having a little chat before the show about the Moreton Bay Regional Council actually has an app that you can download and put on your phone, and it's if you just search Moreton Bay Regional Council, you can find the app. And you can take photos of the issues that the council, that you want to communicate to the council. So if there's, say, a curb that doesn't exist yet, like it's just a step, or the curb hasn't been co-designed and nobody's really sort of thought about, how will someone actually do this who has a wheelchair? That is something really good to take a photo of and send it to the council. And I was just saying to Cheryl that I have taken a photo of a industrial bin, excuse me, that was parked inconveniently in a disability car space, like right in there. And I took a photo of it because it had been in that space for a couple of weeks. I took a photo, and then the next time I went back there, it was I sent it off to the council. The industrial bin was gone. So I thought, so someone's clearly on the other end of that.
Yeah, thumbs up to the council.
Right? So I guess it's about communicating as well. But it's also about knowing what our rights are and where it all comes from, and I guess people's idea of what is a challenge for people with disabilities. And that's something that I know Cheryl's very passionate about.
Well, did you know, Angie, that up until the 1800s, there was no such thing as a disability?
Right. Okay.
So the term disability and being disabled actually comes from the Industrial Revolution, of all things, which was in the 1790s, just before the Victorians took over.
Right.
And so what happened then was people moved from working in their local communities and often in their houses to being expected to go out to work in factories. And that's where able people were able to work in factories and disabled people were not able to work in factories.
Right.
And that's when you get the very beginnings of the division between people who are able and people who are disabled. It's not that they're disabled in terms of life, it's just that they're disabled in terms of not being able to work in a woolen mill or, some other sort of factory producing something.
Okay, so the connection between value in terms of economics, you can be an earner.
You can be an earner, but when you've moved away from being an independent earner, working out of your cottage as a weaver or a spinner or whatever it was you used to do, looking after your pigs and chickens, to working in a factory where you have to fit the standard that's set by an outside group, which is somebody who's much richer than you, has a much bigger political reach than you. So they get to set the rules, and the rules were that you had to be able to stand up all day and, work with heavy machinery that moved very fast. And I mean, a lot of those things have changed now. We no longer employ young children to work in dangerous settings because they're small and they have little fingers. We accept that that's not a good thing, but yet there's still a presumption that disabled people aren't as suitable as workers as able people.
100%.
Thank you very much to the Victorians.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, that's interesting. So the history of disability and the concept of disability as a social construct, what about before that with, the idea of charitable works and, having like part of a religious kind of a...
Well, actually, that's all due to the Victorians as well.
Right, okay.
So in the 1830s, London, which had become very industrialised very quickly,
Sure. Yeah.
ended up with an enormous population of the able who were factory workers and could afford to pay rents, and then a large population of homeless people who were mostly the disabled because they weren't able to work in a factory. So they ended up being poor and homeless.
Yeah.
And then the government actually passed a set of poor law reform acts which were left over from the Elizabethans. So, you know, we're looking at laws from the 1500s now.
Yep.
And they set up a series of workhouses or poorhouses. So the idea of that was if you couldn't support yourself by working in a factory, which of course many people with a physical or intellectual impairment couldn't do,
Yep.
then you would go to the workhouse or the poorhouse and you would get a roof over your head, sometimes a length of rope to drape yourself over to sleep. You didn't always get to have a bed. And sort of a bowl of porridge a day.
Right.
In return for that, you were expected to actually do some work. That's why they called them workhouses.
Like work for the dole.
Exactly like work for the dole or prisoners making number plates.
Yeah.
Mostly it was the jobs nobody else wanted to do. So it was things like stripping down hemp fibres to make rope out of, sewing coal sacks together, you know, pretty much the same as what supported employment is now, people putting biscuits into bags and,
Yeah, for sure.
you know, stickers on stuffing envelopes. It was the stuffing envelopes of the Victorian era.
Yeah.
But it was the beginning of that belief that in order to receive any sort of charitable accommodation, you had to do something in return. It wasn't enough to just say, I'm disabled, I'm starving and I need a roof over my head. You had to actually do something in return to prove that you were worthy of being helped. And that's where we get things like the deserving poor from. You know, so the undeserving poor are people who are probably mostly had mental health challenges, alcoholism, prostitutes who ended up with terrible venereal diseases which affected their brains. And the deserving poor tended to be single mothers and people with disabilities.
Yep.
And I think there is still a fair element of that in society today, as we see by work from the dole schemes, supported employment schemes where there's no real presumption that the work has any intrinsic value.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a case of saying, well, we're not going to give you our largesse or a government pension unless you're prepared to show that you are willing to do whatever pointless task it is we give you, which is tough, but thank you very much to the Victorians.
Absolutely. So it's an overhang that no one's really challenged.
No, nobody's challenged it because it's been going on for so long now that everybody thinks that's the way it is. That's the way it's always been, so that's the way it always should be.
Absolutely.
Like public toilets. You know, public toilets. Public toilets are an invention of the Victorians.
Yeah.
Before the Victorian age, if you were poor, you just found a convenient corner. And if you were rich and you were outside of your own home, you went home to your own home.
Yeah.
So, but for the Crystal Palace exhibition of 1854, one of the designers suddenly realised that he was inviting people from all over the world to celebrate how wonderful England was, and suddenly realised he didn't really want them piddling in every corner of the building. So he actually looked at the ancient Roman ruins of Rome and said, communal toilets. So back in ancient Rome, you had a long plank with some holes in it over a running gutter.
Nice.
For the men.
Right.
Women were expected to go home and use a pot in the privacy of their own home.
Okay.
So Mr. Jennings, his name was, actually set about inventing a communal public toilet. And he put in individual cubicles and then charged people to use it. So not only was he doing something worthwhile for the community, but it was a money-making enterprise. And that's where the term spending a penny comes from.
Right.
So when you hear people say, I'm just going off to spend a penny for the Great Exhibition, that's what they were actually doing, was it cost a penny to use the toilet. And he was the one that organised communal toilets with cubicles. And 150 years later, we're still fighting about communal toilets with cubicles. You know, people in wheelchairs can't get in and out of communal toilet cubicles because they're usually not wide enough, not big enough, and too difficult to navigate around.
Yep.
People with single parents with children of the opposite gender can't use them. People who identify as non-binary don't like to use them. It's just ridiculous. And then you've got the ubiquitous disabled bathroom, which is in a room on its own, but it usually is also a storeroom, the bucket and mop room, and the baby change room.
Yes, the change table.
So why are we still using communal bathrooms that really don't suit anybody?
Yeah,
when
for sure.
we could just have a row of individual rooms that are suitable for disabled people, suitable for parents, suitable for non-binary people.
Yep.
You know, we're still sticking with the Victorian model of 1854 and it's not working.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, bloody Victorians.
Damn the Victorians, we say. But they were also a generation of people who were very keen on self-promotion. So some of the reason I think that these ideas persist is because there was so much written about them.
Yep.
We've got Charles Dickens writing about disabled people and poor people and people in workhouses.
Yep.
And really that's the first time in literature
Yep.
that you see disabled people as actually being characters in stories.
Absolutely. And they're never really a shiny, happy character, are they?
Well, no. I mean, they're either the deserving poor or they come to a grisly end.
Oh, 100%. And I guess we also see, you know, politicians these days are still using that idea of, you know, the deserving poor and the, you know, lifters and leaners thing.
Lifters and leaners, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to forget Joe Hockey.
There are people who are helpful to society and people who are not helpful to society.
Yeah.
But helpful is really only seen in an economic sense.
Absolutely.
Are you economically helpful, meaning a wage earner who pays taxes?
Yep.
Or are you a leech on society because you're not in a paid employment that makes you pay taxes?
100%. And also, you know, it becomes then a very much a divisive little political football, doesn't it? Like, oh, there's all these disabled people. They're just, you know, being at home, being disabled or whatever they think we do. I'm not sure.
Exactly. And it's one of the other things that the Victorians were very big on is the idea that altitude equals power.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, you know, that whether that's taller people being more successful than shorter people, a lot of the phrases we use, like climbing the ladder to success, looking up to someone or looking down on someone.
Yeah.
You know, as a person who in a wheelchair is 103 centimetres, everybody looks down on me and I don't climb any ladders.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not climbing a staircase to success because I don't do stairs.
Absolutely.
So that leaves me outside of the common norm because I'm not doing those things. I'm not climbing ladders. I'm not rising above things. You know, I've noticed that recently there's been a whole lot of wheelchair development and it's all about jacking people up to standing height.
Yeah.
So that they can be seen as equals when talking to other people who are standing up. Wouldn't it be just as easy to put more chairs out?
Absolutely. Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Do I necessarily want to be strapped into a wheelchair that's going to jack me up another 3 feet in the air? Hell no.
Absolutely.
You know, I just want whoever I'm talking to come and sit next to me so that we're at the same head height.
Absolutely. Is it a bit scary, though, to be like sort of elevated on like, they look like cherry pickers, don't they?
They do look like cherry pickers, and I would imagine it would be absolutely terrifying
that
and
would freak
uncomfortable
me out.
and exhausting.
Absolutely. And I have all sorts of proprioception issues. So I think that would like really mess with my brain. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to fall. Yep.
And we're back to the idea that as a disabled person, I need to be making all the effort to meet up with everybody else. And as I say, instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars on a wheelchair to jack me up into the air, could we not just have more chairs in public spaces and get people used to the idea that it's okay to sit down and talk?
Absolutely. But then that's that whole idea of universal design.
Yeah.
Let's actually accommodate everyone.
Yeah.
When we're planning things, let's just plan it for everyone.
And it's also altitude equals power.
Absolutely.
So that's why the penthouse is on the top floor. The executive offices are on the top floor. The bank manager is on the top floor.
Yeah.
Or at the top of the staircase.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go on and that's why. Why do public buildings still have grand staircases? Hotels,
Absolutely.
libraries, theatres, cruise ships. Cruise ships all have a grand staircase. It's completely useless. Nobody uses it. You're on a moving ship. Most of the people are over 75. Nobody's using a grand staircase.
Yep.
But you know, if you want to, that idea persists that a grand staircase is what makes a grand business, you know, the more important you are, the bigger your staircase is. Thank you very much to the Victorians.
Absolutely. That is so true. Yeah.
And it's
Absolutely.
ridiculous.
And
It's ridiculous.
I know you're very passionate about ramps. I'm very passionate about ramps. Anybody that cannot walk up a flight of stairs or down a flight of stairs or either or is passionate about ramps. Why don't we have ramps everywhere?
Why don't we have ramps everywhere? Because the Victorians liked grand staircases. Why did the Victorians like grand staircases? Because the ancient Romans liked grand staircases.
Yeah.
So now we're looking at a culture that's 2,500, 3,000 years old, where nobody had electric wheelchairs or suitcases with rolling wheels or prams
Yeah.
or wheelie walkers
Absolutely.
or shopping trolleys.
Yes, and not just of benefit to disabled people.
No.
It would just make life easier.
The thing that makes me laugh is when I see an enormous grand staircase and then a ramp round the side. It's like you don't need both. Everybody can use the ramp. Why not have a wide, imposing ramp instead of a wide, imposing staircase and then a little ramp hid round the side?
Absolutely.
Or worse, a lift that's sort of almost underground.
Maybe we need an architect on the show to say, like, do you get special brownie points for your staircase design?
Yeah, it's like, why can't you get rid of the idea that a serious building needs a serious staircase?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even domestic design. The last time I was looking to move house, trying to find somewhere that wasn't a townhouse was almost impossible.
Yeah.
I understand townhouses have a smaller footprint,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot of us that don't really fancy climbing a fairly steep set of stairs to get to the toilet or our bedroom. You know, there's got to be a way around these issues that doesn't involve making so many of them inaccessible, and not just accessible for wheelchair users, but people with bad knees, you know, people with prams, people with shopping trolleys, people with little dogs.
People who are aging. I mean, not everybody moves into their house or their unit or whatever and thinks, oh, I'm only going to be here for a couple of years. You know, you sort of have to plan into the future.
Brisbane's particularly bad because so many of the houses are built up on stilts, which comes from Victorians who were living in India, where the houses are built up on stilts to try and keep the snakes and the creepy crawlies out, and also because a lot of it floods fairly frequently.
Yeah, to be fair, for the floods.
There is a practical purpose behind it.
And the breezes.
And the breezes,
Yeah. I love the way we do that in Queensland, though, where we just plan for summer and we don't care about winter and then we all freeze in winter.
Yes, we don't need double glazing, insulation, yada, yada, because we live in Queensland. I mean, I hesitate to point out that those sorts of things which keep the cold out also keep the heat out.
Yeah, true.
So perhaps it would be rather useful to have some of those things in Queensland as well. But, you know, as anybody who's ever lived in an old Queenslander will tell you, they're extremely drafty. And you also have a problem over time where they tend to develop a few little slopes as stumps inevitably sink into the ground.
Yes, so true. Yep. Excellent. Oh, It's been so really fun to talk to you. I actually asked you a little bit of a magical question. It wasn't a magical question. It was just a question that I wanted you to think about, and I don't know the answer to. But if you could think about one thing right now that you could change in the Caboolture, Moreton Bay area that would make everything more accessible, what would it be?
Footpaths.
Footpaths. Yes.
Footpaths.
Okay, love that.
To the council or whoever it is who designs pedestrian access to places, please don't put the footpaths on a slope.
Yeah. Yes.
Just about all wheelchairs have a little shopping trolley front wheel. Also a design of the Victorians, let me say. Yes. Very few wheelchairs are all-wheel drive. Yes. Even I have a powered chair and it's rear-wheel drive with two little shopping trolley wheels on the front.
Yeah.
When you're going down a sloping surface, unfortunately the little shopping trolley wheels on the front turn sideways, which then means I'm powering myself right into the gutter or possibly an oncoming bus.
Yeah.
So, let's have some flat pavements and lots more pavements.
Absolutely.
Sometimes a gravel path is not good enough.
No.
We need the pavements to be wide, we need them to be flat, and we need to have some sort of standard of putting the curbs in. Yeah. I do appreciate when they chop out some of the gutter and put the curb in, but if it's on a 20-degree slope, that's a bit much for a wheelchair to handle. Absolutely.
Or if you've got like a mobility device like mine, I had this little incident where this was actually in Brisbane City in the CBD.
Brisbane City's just terrible.
It is. It's terrible. I was coming down from a footpath to cross the road at the pedestrian crossing, and my front wheels were on the road and my back wheel was on the footpath.
And your feet were floating in midair in the middle.
They were just like running in the air, and I had nowhere to go and I had no way of like actually, moving forward or moving back. I was actually stuck. I was like an upturned turtle, basically.
I've had the same thing happen where the front wheels have rolled sideways against the little lip between the concrete and the tarmac, and my back wheels are stuck up on the top of the rise for the curb, and I'm going nowhere.
Yeah.
So
it's scary, isn't it?
And unfortunately, unlike a skateboarder, you can't just sort of do a little flip of the back and hop over obstacles.
Absolutely, yeah. So the solution to that, would you agree, co-design?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
There's a bit of an attitude of we put a ramp in, what more do you want?
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, actually, I want ramps that are really usable for everybody.
Absolutely.
So putting in a curb that's only sort of 1.5 foot wide is not really enough.
Yeah.
And particularly not enough if I'm competing against bicycle riding pizza deliverers and ladies with jogging prams and headphones on. I can't tell you how many times I've nearly had someone sit in my lap because they've been glued to their iPhone and not looking down below eye level. It's like, hello, excuse me.
Exactly.
And the same thing goes for all those people that put out al fresco dining areas. There's nothing more annoying than trying to sort of do a slalom through a sea of chairs and tables and advertising sandwich boards. It's like people, not everybody can dodge around every chair, pram, table, patio heater.
Yeah.
And even the council does it. There's a couple of places where they've got advertising signs planted in the middle of the pavement.
Yeah. I don't think they're meant to. I think that would be something to take a photo of and put it on the app.
Yeah.
Send it to them and go, oi, check this out.
Is this really a good idea?
Yeah, footpath obstruction. Yeah. Let them know. I guess it's the thing, isn't it? Like, yes, council and government and whatever have a responsibility to actually come and consult with us and do the co-design. But we also have a responsibility to let them know that actually this isn't good enough and maybe there's a better way, because often people with disabilities have the solutions, right?
Well, at least we can point out where the problem is.
Exactly. But I mean,
pavements are not wasted empty space that you can fill up with lots of other stuff. Pavements are necessary for a lot of us.
Yes. Absolutely.
Not everybody is getting out of their car, going into the shop, coming out of the shop and getting straight back in their car.
No, absolutely. Oh, disability car park. Sorry, I'm not going to leave this until we've done this.
Okay, we can't blame that on the Victorians.
No. But when you have a disability car space and all around it is like a curb, it's just a step all around, and you're like, okay, so you've put the space there, but then you've got to step up onto the footpath.
Yeah.
Like there's actually no graded edge. Like there's nothing to, like, no kind of little ramp or anything.
No.
It's just a step.
Murrayfield Shopping Centre has a wonderful sort of middle mezzanine level that's got a lot of disability car parking spaces, which is great, except that they're all on a slope and they're all pretty much in the dark. Now, I'm pretty lucky because my wheelchair actually folds up like a pram, so it's relatively straightforward to get in and out of a vehicle. But for a lot of people who use mobility scooters, you actually have to take them apart and put them back together again, a bit like building a Lego model.
Yeah.
So, and inevitably you always end up doing that on your hands and knees in the car park in a puddle of oil in pretty much the dark.
Oh.
On a slope.
Okay.
So you're hanging on to several very heavy pieces of equipment as you try and put them all together.
Where do you park at Murrayfield?
In that middle level, that's where you go up the ramp, and then there's a second level car park sort of.
Do you mean like where Heritage is?
No. It's just as you come in on the first, as you go down towards that first entry into the shopping centre, and the road to the left leads up to the health hub. And then as you go down that road, you'll see that there's a right-hand turn to go to the regular car park on the ground level.
Right.
And then there's actually a little ramp a little bit further up, and that leads to another car park.
Oh, okay. Because I always park just, you know, where you go up onto the mezzanine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm using my hands here wildly, because people who are just listening to this can see that.
And it's great. Like, I really appreciate that they've put in an area that's got a lot of disability car parking spaces, but they're not great spaces because they're on a slope.
Yeah.
They're in the middle of the car park. So if you're trying to put your mobility scooter together and you're down on your hands and knees, once again, you're at the mercy of the Land Cruiser driving public who are 5 or 6 or 7 feet above you.
Yeah, right.
And possibly aren't going to see you. So...
All right. Okay. Well, where I park, there's heaps of disability car parks. And
yes, if we could ask people not to leave their trolleys there.
Yeah, right.
I know it's convenient because it's at the end of the path and there's that stripy space that you think nobody ever uses for anything, but actually we really do.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Okay. Well, is there anything that we haven't covered or that you wanted to talk about before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. I might like to point out the Victorians are also mostly responsible for wheelchair design, back to my grumbling about the little shopping trolley front wheels.
No, that's fair.
So they were originally called a bath chair, and that's because of the town of Bath, not because of having a bath.
Ah, I did not know that because I've heard the term bath chair and I've gone...
chair. Well, Bath is a city in England that has hydrothermal pools, which the Romans, funnily enough, really loved. So they built bathing areas. And it was considered that taking the waters, which are full of minerals and smell rather like rotten eggs, was supposed to be healthful for you. And in point of fact, it actually is, because if you're riddled with intestinal parasites, drinking sulphur-infused water will kill them all off. Possibly not that big a deal for today, but that's when they first started putting wheels on chairs to wheel sickly people in and out of the bathing establishments, where you would sip on this nasty lukewarm sulphuric water, or you would go and sit in it, and it was supposed to sort of make you better by a process of osmosis, I suppose.
Right.
So that's basically what wheelchairs were. They were a wicker or a wooden kitchen chair with 2 big wheels on it, not unlike a penny farthing.
Yeah. 2
big wheels on the back and 2 little tiny wheels at the front for turning. And 150 years later, that hasn't really changed either.
No,
the
that's
folding
true.
wheelchair came after the First World War when a mining engineer who'd been paralysed
Right.
worked out how to use the folding mechanism of a camp stool to make a fold-up wheelchair. And that is essentially unchanged in 100 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's time we moved on, people.
Yeah.
So, interestingly, I found an article about the boardwalk in Atlantic City, of all places, which was
Okay.
very, very popular it was opened up in the 1890s, the height of the Victorians,
Yeah.
and they supplied people with rolling chairs and a servant to push them up and down the boardwalk so that they could see the shops at their leisure. So that was considered to be sort of a decadent extravagance,
Yeah.
was you could hire a rolling chair and a manservant to push it so that you could walk, because I think it was a couple of kilometres long, and the shopkeepers all paid to have access to the boardwalk. So you could promenade up and down the boardwalk, look in the expensive shops, all from the comfort of your seated chair.
Nice. So it was sort of like a more simplified rickshaw.
Yeah, actually very similar to a rickshaw, really.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and I do wonder how much of that attitude sort of persists that, you know, wheelchairs are for the lazy.
Yeah. Well, no, it's true, isn't it? I saw a meme on Facebook where they were using a mobility scooter because they'd been out drinking, and so it was like this idea of like, oh, you're too drunk to walk, you'll go on the mobility scooter. And like I sort of had a bit of a chuckle at that at first, and then I was like, oh, hang on, this is really communicating that actually this is
That they're a convenience and not a
Yeah.
necessity.
yeah. And
I
yeah.
follow a lot of cruise ship bloggers because I just love cruising. It's the best holiday if you're disabled. It's wonderful. Everywhere's flat. Everywhere's got lifts. Everywhere's got handrails.
Yeah.
There's lots of activities all day and all night. The most fun of which is just watching everybody else.
Yeah.
But there's a bit of a movement at the moment where people are complaining about the number of mobility scooters on cruise ships and saying that the numbers are increasing and they're clogging up the lifts and they're slowing things down. And I'm like, that's not really true, because cruise ships do have disabled cabins.
Yeah.
And they're wonderful. Let me quick shout out to the cruise lines that do build disabled cabins on their ships. They're fantastic. There's not very many of them.
Yeah.
So you tend to have to book a long way in advance to make sure you get one. But they're terrific.
Yeah.
So the number of people using mobility scooters probably hasn't actually increased, because on a cruise ship, the doors of the cabins, as anybody who's been on a cruise ship will know, are incredibly narrow. The cabins themselves are very narrow. So you can't use a wheelchair inside a normal cabin.
Right.
And you can't get a wheelchair in and out of a normal cabin, and you are not allowed to park a mobility device outside the cabin. So if you have a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, you have to be able to fit it into the cabin with you. You can't park them outside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I've never been on one of these cruises.
Yeah,
so I
it's
don't
an
know.
evacuation route thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so the people who were complaining that there's so many more disability scooters, there actually isn't. They're just noticing them more.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a bit the same thing. Cruise ships all have an enormous staircase in the middle, and it's beautiful. Sometimes it's glass or filled with crystals or sparkly. Nobody ever walks up and down it because they're a death trap.
Yeah.
But they look very nice in photos.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, most cruise ship passengers are in their golden years because they're the people with the time and the leisure to enjoy going on cruises.
Yeah.
You know, they're very popular with disabled people because they're a wonderful way to have a holiday.
Yeah.
So, you know, the number of people that are eligible to use a staircase is very limited.
Yeah.
The other thing is most things on cruise ships take place on the bottom 3 floors because that's the most stable part of the ship is at the bottom and in the middle.
Okay.
So that's where the main dining rooms are, the shops, the guest services desks, the bars, the theatre. So most of the traffic in the lifts is going between those 3 floors, which are serviced by lifts or a grand staircase that nobody uses.
Right.
Whip out the staircase and put in a ramp, and then everybody can go up and down.
Well, absolutely, because that's the thing with ships, isn't it? Like every bit of of space is it's got to be accounted for, so it's a big investment for cruise ships to actually use all of that space for a staircase.
It is,
especially when it's not used.
It's not used. It's sometimes it's used as seating for a big event because everybody can perch on the steps.
Right.
And it's used as a backdrop by the photographers.
Right, expensive backdrop.
And a very expensive backdrop, but they're basically useless. They're a decorative feature. And
Absolutely.
as I say, they fill them up with lights or Swarovski crystals, or a lot of them are glass. Well, I don't know about you, but there's no way in the world, even if I could get up and down stairs, that I would be attempting it in high-heeled shoes and a long frock on a glass staircase.
No way.
That's just a disaster waiting to happen, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So it's like, take the staircase out and put in a ramp. You don't need both.
So this ramp, would you propose the ramp be like a circular sort of a situation, or like that it is one of those kind of zigzag back and forward kind of
I think
things?
a nice sort of sloping oval one that sort of circles around the building would be lovely.
That's
I live
cool.
in an apartment building that's purpose designed for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
So it's 3 stories. The top 2 stories are all wheelchair accessible apartments. We have 2 sets of fire stairs,
Right.
which nobody can actually use,
Okay. Yeah.
and a 1-person lift,
Yeah.
which you're not supposed to use in an emergency either. When I was looking at moving in, I said, do we have an evacuation plan?
Yeah.
And I was told, oh, well, we've got fire detection equipment. Like, oh, good.
Awesome. You can know what's happening.
You know, why do we need 2 staircases for a building full of people that can't use either of them?
Absolutely. Well, I was a teacher in disability education. We were trialing this situation for a student who had classrooms on the 2nd floor. Right. Now, the solution could have been just move the classroom to the 1st floor. But anyway. So they brought in an OT and this kind of sling rig thing that was
grief.
Yeah, and it was basically like it looked like something that the SES would use to winch somebody off a
Or
cliff.
possibly something for moving live cattle and sheep on and off a cliff.
Right. Yeah, so like the
Bale of wool.
in theory the student would have been like strapped into this, right?
Wheelchair and all?
No, lying down flat and then dragged down the stairs. And I'm like, where's the dignity in that? Like, I wouldn't like that.
And also the ability to avoid a head injury when their head goes donk, 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 donk all the way down the stairs.
Yeah. So we had this trial situation, right? And it was sort of like, let's have a look. Let's see how like viable it is. And, let's run it past the student, of course, to see if that was something that they wanted to do.
And I'm thinking that would have been a big fat no.
Right? Hard pass. But like the OT was like showing us like how you would sort of, you'd have one person on each end of it and you'd be lifting it up so that the person in this sling wouldn't hit their head.
So not like the Princess Diaries where they slide down the stairs on a tea tray.
No, like I think that kind of would have been better. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's also about preserving dignity. And I do get that in an emergency situation, it's about lives and you need to save lives and you need to get people out. And I think that's going to be another episode for us where we talk about evacuation and disability, because that's a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah. I used to be a nurse and we used to have fire drills every year where we were expected to drag people who couldn't walk unaided down the fire stairs on a blanket, which I'm pretty sure would have maimed most of them for life, and probably us too. You got a bunch of little 17-year-old girls trying to drag someone who may be 6'4" and over 150 kilos down a winding set of stairs on a blanket. I think
that's not a controlled operation.
Thank goodness we never had to actually do that in real life.
Yeah.
So, but I have to say the resus dummies didn't look very happy either.
No, I can't imagine. So I'm just wondering how we're going for time, Mario. I didn't look.
Sorry?
I didn't look at how what time we started.
We started before 11, so we have 45 minutes.
So should I wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we've come to the end of today's discussion.
Yeah, I think so.
But we have lots of other things to talk about in other weeks.
Okay.
I'm happy to come back and talk about cruise ship holidays for people with disabilities because I think they're wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is where we invite people in our audience who we're going to have soon because we've just done episode 1. Yay!
Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you. I would like to know from people who are listening what they would like to hear about because we can source anybody. Basically, why not? You know, let's put that out there. And no celebrities, please. but if there's something that you really want to hear about or information that you really want to talk about on the show, then let us know. And we've got all of the social media things that will be set up. Just search Is Everybody Here podcast. And we'll give you details in the show notes to find those things. And, just drop us some thoughts about what you'd like to hear about. And I do believe that we will be having Cheryl back on the show because she's awesome.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm always happy to come and talk.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdoms, your research, your expertise, and your lived experience with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Everybody, like, subscribe, tell your friends. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you. Bye.